Good evening, you're watching Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Tonight, well, the breaking story as we speak, a day of high drama as India and Pakistan exchanged words over the NSA talks, each country virtually daring the other to call off the talks. India began the day by telling Pakistan not to talk to the separatist Hurriyat conference. Pakistan responded by saying that they will not accept India's advice. And now India has hit back at Pakistan, accusing them of changing the agenda and saying that the talks cannot proceed like this. And yet, not officially calling off the talks just yet, leaving it to Pakistan to do so. Does this mean that these talks are now most unlikely to happen? And what does this mean for the future of India-Pakistan ties? Well, Maya Meetchandani joins us for the very latest first on this, what I would say is a bizarre series of events. Maya, one statement after another, and yet not one country has so far stepped forward and said these talks aren't happening, because it doesn't look like they're actually going to happen.
Right. Well, Nidhi, actually, I mean, in Shakespearean language, this would be a tragic comedy, honestly, if it wasn't such a serious thing where two countries who are just not getting along coming to the table. It would actually have just been funny. As you pointed out rightly, both are challenging the other to officially call off the talks. But that really remains now an issue of splitting hairs, because at the end of the day, even if you take the assumption that Sartaj Aziz does come to Delhi on Sunday and for these talks in some shape, way or form, what does it really mean? At the end of the day, we have seen both India and Pakistan take an extremely difficult hardline position with each other. India saying that there's no question of Pakistan talking to the Hurriyat. That's not a condition that India will accept. That both prime ministers actually in Russia, in Ufa, had agreed that the talks would only be on terror. Pakistan says that that was never clearly stated in the agenda, that there were other outstanding issues, and talks have to be all encompassing. Well, in a sense, one can sort of say what happened in Ufa stays in Ufa, because what the prime ministers seem to have agreed on about a month ago has really been questioned today by statements we've seen both from Islamabad and Delhi. As you rightly pointed out, we're basically ending this day still wondering whether these talks will indeed take place or not. The ball now back in Pakistan's court.
Well, I'm going to take a moment to just breathe, because we're also hearing from Pakistani government sources at this point that they're waiting for India to tell them whether or not these talks are still going to take place. So really, the theatre of the absurd describes what has been happening for the past 2 days. We've got KC Singh, former diplomat, joining us tonight, Sambit Patra of the BJP as well. Ambassador KC Singh, to you first, how do you look at what we are seeing for the last 2 days, Mr. Singh? How would you describe it?
In a sense, it's a repeat of what they did with the foreign secretary level talks. As you know, when Nawaz Sharif came here, they were very happy sort of hugs and then announcement that the foreign secretaries will meet. And then we waited for about 3-4 months and various things happened in Pakistan. It was not called off when Nawaz Sharif government was besieged. It wasn't called off when ceasefire violations were taking place. They waited for the Hurriyat, and finally on Hurriyat they called it off. Now again this time we've been seeing, when the Prime Minister met the Chief of the Army Staff, signals were coming from that side that they are preparing a broad-based agenda. They did not respond to an invitation regarding the date. So clearly there were symptoms of a problem. Now we can only go by the words of what we are told the Prime Ministers agreed upon, and if they really agreed upon and all the I's were dotted and all the full stops were put. We said at the point of the UFA joint statement that it was a loose statement. That statement was liable to interpretation in different ways. So that means there was some verbal understanding. Now verbal understandings, when they go awry at the level of Prime Minister, you have nowhere else to go. Kissinger has in fact said this. He says symmetry is a very complex thing, because if things go wrong at the highest level, what level do you go to? So I think this is precisely what's happened. It's a slow wreck which has been in the making the last few weeks, and total lack of diplomacy in it, where you leave space for each other, where you back off. If you can't converge on something, you back off, you postpone it. Why does every time it had to be a train wreck?
No, so in your view, is it now very certain to you that these talks are not happening, or do you see a situation where India is not going to bite the bait and call it off? Pakistan at the moment seems to be saying we're waiting for India to call it off. So Sartaj Aziz lands here, the Hurriyat gets detained, he comes here, there's a sort of a big melodrama over this whole thing, and he goes back. Is that what you see happening possibly?
No, if he comes here and you detain Hurriyat, Hurriyat is very happy because the focus comes on them from an elected government in J&K. So that is precisely what Hurriyat wants. It's a group without any major following in Jammu and Kashmir. It gains relevance. No, I don't think you could allow Hurriyat to be here basically, or to be turned into martyrs, but that is the way it is headed. I don't think Indian government wants to go that way. But what strikes me, I think the mistake was they raised the anti-terror mechanism from the additional secretary level to the NSAs. Now you cannot restrict an NSA, like in the case of Pakistan, who's been a finance minister, he's been a foreign minister, he is still a de facto foreign minister, to come here and only discuss terrorism. If you only wanted terrorism discussed, they should have had NIA heads or intelligence bureau heads or policemen, not a policeman masquerading as NSA, saying because I will only discuss terror, the other guy should only discuss with me. That was never going to work.
All right, we've got Major General Rashid Qureshi, the former spokesman to President Musharraf, also joining us tonight from Islamabad. General Qureshi, what's your gut feeling tonight? Do you think that Pakistan cannot come to Delhi for these talks?
I think what we feel here is that India is the one who's going to take the decision. I heard KC Singh just now, and in some of the things that he said, I do agree with him. If, for example, the NSA level talks, people do assemble for them, you can't be discussing or, shall we say, restricting the topic to what India wants, actually. And I'm not saying that one shouldn't be sensitive to what India wants, but I think everything needs to be discussed by the national security advisors, which brings the two countries together to move towards a peaceful solution of all issues that confront India-Pakistan. And the way I think things are headed now, and pardon me for saying this, but I didn't have great hopes, and I thought India at some stage would come to a stage where they'd say, okay, talks are called off. India's been doing this time and again, and I don't think it'll be different this time.
But General Qureshi, I'm going to come to the point about the Indian government's position. But the fact is, when you look at the UFA joint statement, which is here again in front of me, it was very explicitly stated there that the two NSAs would meet to discuss all issues connected to terrorism. So how did Jammu and Kashmir come into it? How did CBMs come into it? How did other issues come into it? The only other issues mentioned in the UFA statement are the release of fishermen and a mechanism for facilitating religious tourism. So did not Pakistan change the goalposts as well post this joint statement in UFA by insisting on including Kashmir in the talks?
Nidhi, the problem that I see is that such important talks at such a level have to wait for the 11th hour for countries to either decide to attend or not to attend. This should have been decided a month ago.
I agree.
So frankly, I'm quite surprised at what is happening between the two countries now, and I feel this friction wasn't necessary at all.
Sambit Patra, let me ask you this question. Now, last year the Indian government called off the talks with the foreign secretaries because the Hurriyat leadership had gone to meet the Pakistani foreign secretary. This time, when these talks in UFA were decided, did the Indian government not do its homework and at least have some kind of a back channel with the Pakistani side on how they would handle the Hurriyat issue? Because the Hurriyat issue is an issue for them. They've always met the Hurriyat. They were always likely to do that again. So was this badly handled by the government here as well?
Nidhi, if something is explicitly clear, if something is written in black and white, and both the Prime Ministers, Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi and Prime Minister Mr. Nawaz Sharif, sign on the dotted line. And as you were reading out, in fact, let me read out the first provision of the joint statement. A meeting in New Delhi between the two NSAs to discuss all issues connected to terrorism. Is there any ambiguity in the statement that I just made? A statement which was signed by both the both the secretaries, foreign secretaries. So it's but natural that things were absolutely crystal clear. It is Pakistan's old tactics that they want to involve a third stakeholder. the government of India has been maintaining, rightly maintaining, according to the Shimla Doctrine and the Lahore Declaration, that there are no third stakeholders between talks. I mean, the talks on terror has to be between Union of India and Pakistan. Hurriyat and other separatists have nothing to do with this talk. Pakistan also understands this, but it is the stubbornness of Pakistan, probably because Pakistan was searching for an alibi to pull away from these talks. Pakistan somehow could gather, the dossiers would be given, evidences would be presented to Pakistan as to the kind of activity Pakistan has been involved in, both in the border and otherwise.
Sambit,
they had nothing to say. That is the issue.
The Pakistani leadership,
they're running away. They were
look,
finding
the Pakistani
an
leadership has always met the Hurriyat conference when they have come to India. Should we not have anticipated that this would happen, that there needed to be some kind of a compromise worked out in back channels, not through the media, certainly not at the last minute? Should this have been handled differently in the back channels, in the run-up to these talks?
Nidhi, as far as this particular government is concerned, the stand of this government is absolutely clear from the day one. Let me remind you of the fact when Mr. Modi was to be sworn in, he had invited Nawaz Sharif. And remember, I mean, despite the previous custom that whenever their chiefs came to India, they met the separatists. Nawaz Sharif came for the swearing-in ceremony, but he could not meet the separatists. The lines were drawn the first day. The rule was written the first day that yes, please come, be our guest, let's talk, let's be friends, but please don't cross these lines. You cannot. This is a new government, a strong government. This government does not allow dialogue between you and the separatists. The second time they tried with the foreign secretary level talk, again the red lines were shown to them. No, this is the Rubicon, you cannot cross the Rubicon.
And yet,
third time,
the very
yet again,
separatists, may I say, the very
despite
separatists who were marginalized in Jammu and Kashmir for so many years are the headline today. The very separatists who were marginalized and becoming irrelevant in Jammu and Kashmir are now the headline. They are the centerpiece and the reason why these talks are being, so they found a newfound importance.
They can never be the centerpiece.
Abhishek Singhvi, is this the message of a strong government, or are we just seeing utter confusion on both sides?
Well, what I am now going to say, Nidhi, is of course about domestic India, but I hate it, but it has to get all over the world because Pakistan is hearing, the whole world is looking. We live in a media age. I think it is absolutely inexcusable the kind of lack of coherence, consistency and continuity which the government has displayed. One area which is defined by these 3 C's is foreign policy. We are a proud democracy, an economic giant. There is an imploding, shattered country which is our neighbor, but yet we are made to look like fools because we are not following consistency. Point number 1, why was UFA done if full groundwork was not there? Was UFA a photo op? Was it just jingoism and good statements and self-congratulatory backslapping? You laid a grundnorm, a boundary, a red flag of a Hurriyat talk at the foreign secretary level before UFA. Now, if you follow that boundary, and I was not the one who made it, then how many more times is Gurdaspur, 1,000 ceasefires, Naved, and back to square one Hurriyat on Saturday and Sunday? Which red line are you going to follow? Is it not a mockery? Did the government not think of this before? And as they say, can I finish please first?
Okay, finish your point.
Number 2, what kind of talks are you planning, Nidhi, when you don't know the agenda of Mr. Aziz? You don't know his program? What will be the content? You don't know his itinerary? Who is making foreign policy? Is it the Prime Minister alone, or the Prime Minister with the PMO, or the NSA, or the IB chief? Well, one person we know certainly who is not making it is the Foreign Minister and the Foreign Ministry.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you in just a moment.
Most important, Nidhi,
half a second. Let me just give Shekhar Gupta.
Nidhi, half a second.
Yeah.
Nidhi,
I have to come in over here.
Has made us look very sloppy, gauche and clumsy because the central government is speaking with one voice,
Nidhi,
the BJP in Jammu and Kashmir with a second voice, a PDP with a third voice, and the government, the coalition government of J&K with a fourth voice.